I'm Ashley, 27, and I was going over client campaigns when my phone pinged. A message from Mom read, "We've replaced all the locks. You no longer live here." My hands shook as I typed back. How bold, how amusing. They really think they're brave, haha. But my insides were unraveling. The house my grandmother left to me, rightfully mine by legal will, was being taken away by my own parents. I had no clue this gift would become a battlefield. Before I unravel the chaos that followed, tell me where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you've ever had to deal with a toxic family, because what happened next shocked even my legal team. I grew up in Boston, and honestly, I always thought my family was pretty normal, not flawless, but nothing out of the ordinary. My parents, Margaret and Robert, were average working folks. Dad ran a local bank branch. Mom was a third-grade teacher. We lived a stable suburban life. Regular dinners, road trips to Cape Cod, sibling squabbles with my younger brother Jason. But the glue of our family? That was my grandma Eleanor. She owned a stunning old Victorian home in Cambridge, passed down for 3 generations. That house held our memories. Holidays, baking sessions, long talks on the porch. It was my refuge during my moody teenage years. She was more than a grandmother. She was my guide, my defender. When Mom's constant standards weighed me down, Grandma reminded me, "You get this house, Ashley." You see what it means. It's not just walls. It's legacy. At the time, I didn't grasp the weight of her words. But when Grandma passed away last year at 92, our world shook. And then the will was read. Everything changed. To everyone's surprise, especially my parents, she had left her house to me. She'd also included a handwritten note. "This home isn't just property. It's our family's roots, and Ashley will protect that." My parents' reactions were telling. They were floored. They'd assumed the house would be sold and the money split, or at the very least, passed to them. I still remember the look on my mother's face, shock melting into rage as the attorney read it aloud. "There has to be a mistake," she said stiffly. She wasn't thinking straight. But there was no error. The will had been correctly signed, witnessed, and notarized. My grandmother had full mental clarity. The house legally belonged to me. Still, I wanted peace. Over coffee the next morning, I said gently, "Nothing has to change. I'm not shutting you out. I want to keep the house in the family like Grandma wanted. We can still gather there." My best friend Leah was skeptical. "Your mom's always been controlling, Ash. And that house? It's worth at least $1 million. That's a huge temptation." "They're my parents," I said. "They just need time." And for a few months, it seemed like time was helping. Things were tense, sure, but not hostile. I moved in and started slow renovations, maintaining the character while upgrading essentials like wiring and pipes. I often invited the family over, but my mother criticized everything. "She kept that wallpaper for 4 decades. She'd mutter, touching the freshly painted dining room wall. "Those curtains? Completely out of place for this house." Jason tried to smooth things over. "She's just emotional, Ash. This house was part of their retirement plan." Dad, too. They'd been counting on the sale? I got it, but I wasn't budging. I was keeping Grandma's wishes alive. The breaking point came when I shared my plan. Convert part of the house into a small local art gallery. The large parlor was ideal, and the income would help with maintenance. At a family dinner 2 weeks ago, I brought it up. My dad's face turned to stone. "That's a residential area. You can't just open a business there." "Actually, I can," I explained calmly. "I've already checked with the city. With permits and limited hours, it qualifies under the historical use clause." Mom pushed her plate aside. "So you're going to ruin this street with cars and strangers? Is that your plan?" "It's not like that," I said. "Appointments only, quiet viewings. It's a curated space, not a zoo." Things got heated until Dad slammed the table. "It's her property. If Ashley wants to make dumb decisions, it's her right." I thought that was his way of backing off. They left early. Jason stayed behind to help clean up. "They'll adjust," he said. "Just give them space." I believed him. I had no idea they were setting a trap. I had a 3-day business trip in Chicago, a huge pitch I'd worked on for months. It went perfectly. I landed a major client. I was thrilled. On the flight back to Boston, can't wait to crash in my own bed, I texted Leah. I Ubered straight to the house, lugged my suitcase up the porch, my key jammed, no big deal. The old door always stuck. But then I noticed a brand new deadbolt. My pulse quickened. I tried Mom, no answer. Tried Dad, straight to voicemail. I was about to call Jason, ping, text, from Mom. We've changed all the locks. You're no longer welcome here. This house belongs to the whole family. I froze. My hands trembled as I typed, how bold. How amusing. They really think they're brave, haha. I wanted to sound fearless. But inside, I was falling apart as I stood on the porch of what was supposed to be my home, the same home my grandmother had left me in her will, legally mine. I couldn't catch my breath. I called Jason. Did you know about this? I asked the moment he picked up. Know what? His voice sounded genuinely puzzled. Mom and Dad changed the locks on Grandma's house. I've been locked out of my house. There was a long, heavy silence. Oh, Ash. I'm so sorry. I didn't know they were going to do that. Where are they? I need to speak to them now. They're at the Cape for the weekend. They won't be back until Sunday night. My thoughts spun. It was Friday evening. Where was I even supposed to go for 2 days? Jason, do you have a key? Can you come let me in? Another pause. I don't, Ash. And even if I did? Look, I can't get in the middle of this. They're really upset about the gallery thing. I stared at my phone in disbelief. This is my house, Jason. They can't just lock me out like this. Maybe give them a little time to cool down. Stay with someone this weekend. I ended the call and slowly sank down on the steps, overwhelmed, not just by my parents, but by Jason too. That's when I saw the trash bags, 3 big black ones sitting near the hedge. I opened the first, my clothes, carelessly jammed in. The second, my bathroom stuff. The third, photo frames, books, and keepsakes. They'd literally packed up my life and left it by the curb. I called Leah, trying not to let my voice break. They locked me out, I whispered. I'm coming, she said. You're staying with me tonight. As I waited, I sat beside the bags, guarding them. What if my parents had warned the neighbors I might show up? Every passing car made me flinch. When Leah arrived, she helped load my stuff into her car. This is insane, she kept saying. They can't do this. I know, I said, numb. But they already did. At her apartment, I noticed several of my most valuable things were missing. Grandma's jewelry box. Inside were heirloom pieces and the original copy of her will. Also missing, my birth certificate, my passport, and a journal Grandma kept about the house's history. These weren't things I forgot. They'd intentionally kept them. That night, I laid on Leah's lumpy pull-out couch and cried until I couldn't anymore. The pain wasn't just emotional, it felt like something sharp inside my chest. These were my parents, the people who were supposed to love me the most. Instead, they threw me away like I didn't matter. I thought about forcing my way back in, smashing a window or something. But I knew better. That would only give them ammunition to use against me. I needed to be smarter. The next morning, Jason called. I talked to them, he said. They're not changing their minds. They think I'm being selfish? I asked. This is my home, Jason. They feel like you're dishonoring the family, turning it into a business. Dad said if you'd just agree to sell it and split the money, none of this would have happened. So this is about money, I said. They're tossing me on the street over cash. It's more than that, Ash. They think you're ignoring what they want. And what about what Grandma wanted? I shot back. Does that not matter? Jason sighed. Look, if you apologize and say you'll talk about selling, maybe they'll let you back in. Apologize? For what? For owning something left to me? For trying to carry out Grandma's wishes? You're not helping your case here, Ash. I'm not trying to help a case. I'm trying to understand how my own family could treat me like this. When the call ended, Leah put a hand on my shoulder. You need a lawyer. Like, now. She was right. This wasn't going to get solved with a heart-to-heart. They'd crossed a line. I needed legal backup. That weekend was one of the worst of my life. I felt alone, adrift, and scared of what lay ahead. But beneath that fear, something else started forming. Resolve. They had no right to take what was legally mine. They couldn't just toss me aside. And I wasn't about to let them get away with it. On Monday morning, I called in sick and started looking for lawyers who specialized in real estate law. By midday, I had a consultation booked with Sophia Chin, highly rated for her expertise and her empathy. Her office was in a charming converted brownstone downtown. The warm lighting and soft chairs made me feel just a little less tense. She listened carefully while I laid out the entire situation. She asked a few clarifying questions, took notes, and then leaned in. First of all, what your parents did is illegal. It's called a self-help eviction, and it's against the law, even if they were the legal owners, which they're not. You have the deed and a copy of the will, right? My stomach dropped. The original will had been inside Grandma's jewelry box, the one my parents didn't pack. But I have a copy, I said. The lawyer sent me one after the reading. Sophia nodded. That's good. We can get the certified copy from the probate court. And the deed? Same deal, but it's public record. We can pull that easily. She typed a few things on her computer. Here's what we're doing immediately. We'll file for an emergency injunction to get you back into the home. Then we'll go after them for damages, for the unlawful eviction, and for the missing personal property. When she said damages, it all suddenly hit me. I was going to have to sue my parents. I just want my house back, I said softly. Sophia's face softened with empathy. I know this is incredibly hard. They're your parents. But instead of going through the legal process, they chose to handle this inappropriately. Our priority now is protecting you. I nodded in agreement, and she immediately began preparing the legal documents. I signed several forms, and she assured me she'd file them that same afternoon. Until then, she gave me firm advice. Start documenting everything. Messages from your parents or brother, any cost you've had to cover, anything missing from your belongings. And don't contact them directly. From here on, let all communication go through me. As I stepped out of her office, my phone buzzed. A notification. My mother had tagged me in a Facebook post. She'd written, heartbroken that my own daughter would go against everything this family stands for, turning her grandmother's cherished home into a business. Some people forget their roots. It was already gathering comments. Dozens of friends, extended family, and old neighbors were reacting. Most of them expressed shock, calling me selfish and siding with my parents. My mother had spun the story, painting me as the villain. And people believed her without hesitation. That night, I showed Leah the post. This is a public shaming campaign, she said, her voice tight with anger. They're trying to manipulate you through guilt and embarrassment. Later that evening, I got the first of many voicemails from my father. His tone was harsh, clipped, one I had never heard from him before. You've made a huge mistake. Getting a lawyer involved, Ashley. Your mother is heartbroken. If you think the family's going to stand by while you ruin your grandmother's memory, you're wrong. Drop this, or you'll regret it. Each new voicemail became more aggressive. By the third, he was threatening to challenge the will, claiming I manipulated Grandma into leaving me the house. It was a complete lie, but defending against it would take time, money, and emotional strength. Meanwhile, the family began choosing sides. Aunt Carol, Mom's sister, called to say how disappointed she was in me. 2 cousins unfriended me on Facebook. Uncle Pete, Dad's brother, emailed a single line, "Do the right thing before this turns ugly." Only one relative stood by me, Grandma's sister, Patricia. "This isn't what Eleanor wanted," she said gently when she called. "She left you that house because she trusted you. Don't let them intimidate you." 3 days after I hired Sophia, Jason texted, asking to meet for coffee. At the cafe, he looked tired and uneasy as he stirred his drink. "They're selling the house to developers," he said, avoiding my eyes. "What? I froze. They've been in discussions for a while, even before you brought up the idea of the gallery. They're planning to tear it down? I asked, my stomach turning. They want to replace it with luxury condos. Jason gave a miserable nod. They say the land is more valuable than the house. The offer is $2 million. I felt physically sick. Were they ever going to tell me? This is my house, Jason. He looked at the table. They thought if they pushed hard enough, you'd cave. The developers have a deadline. If the deal doesn't go through by the end of the quarter, they'll move on. Suddenly it all became clear. The urgency, the cruelty, the smear campaign. This wasn't about family or tradition or respecting grandma. It was about money. Nothing else. The financial pressure was mounting on me too. I was covering legal fees, replacing everyday essentials still locked inside the house, and helping Leah with utilities and groceries since I was staying indefinitely. My savings were disappearing fast. Work was also becoming a struggle. Though my boss was kind when I explained I was dealing with a family emergency, my performance was slipping. I missed deadlines, zoned out during meetings, and couldn't concentrate on creative work. The client I'd landed in Chicago had already begun questioning the early drafts we'd submitted. Leah stayed my anchor through it all, but I could feel the toll it was taking on our friendship. Her one-bedroom apartment wasn't built for two people, and her boyfriend was clearly growing irritated with me always being there. You can stay as long as you need, Leah insisted when I brought it up. Brian understands. But I saw the fatigue in her face. I couldn't keep living like this. I had to fix things, somehow. A week after our first meeting, Sophia called with an update. The emergency injunction hearing is set for next Monday, she told me. The judge is known for being fair, but she's conservative. She'll go by the book, which helps us, but we need to be absolutely ready. What about my parents? I asked. Have they responded? They've hired Richard. Baxter, she said, her tone uneasy. That name clearly wasn't good news. He's aggressive, handles a lot of family property disputes. He'll try to twist this, make you look like you manipulated your grandmother. That's absurd. I'd never... I know, Sophia said calmly. But brace yourself. These cases can turn ugly fast. That night, I stared at the ceiling from Leah's couch, unable to sleep. How could the people who raised me, who taught me values and right from wrong, now be willing to lie, just to protect their financial gain? It was a betrayal so deep I couldn't wrap my head around it. But below the grief, something else was stirring. A burning, focused anger, one that would soon become the fuel I needed to fight back. On the morning of the hearing, I dressed deliberately. A modest navy dress, low heels, hair pulled back neatly. Sophia had reminded me, appear respectful, sympathetic, first impressions matter. As we met on the courthouse steps, running through our strategy one final time, my phone rang, an unknown number. Normally I'd ignore it, but instinct told me to answer. Is this Ashley Parker? A male voice asked. Yes. Who's this? Officer Daniels, Boston PD. We need you to come in to answer some questions about stolen property. My stomach turned to ice. Stolen property? What are you talking about? We've received a report that you removed valuable items from your parents' residence, jewelry, documents, without their permission. I froze, then glanced at Sophia, panic rising. She took the phone instantly. This is Sophia Chin, Ms. Parker's attorney, she said, calm but firm. Can you clarify the accusations against my client? I could only hear her side of the call, but it was clear what had happened. My parents had filed a police report accusing me of stealing my grandmother's jewelry and family records, the same items they never returned when they locked me out. My client won't be coming in today, Sophia said, her tone hardening. She has a court appearance already scheduled. Also, those items were legally willed to her. We'll address this fabricated report after the hearing. She hung up and turned to me, jaw tight. This is a tactic. They're trying to intimidate you and flip the narrative. If they can brand you as a thief, it undermines your credibility in court. They're lying to the police, I whispered. My own parents are filing false charges against me. Sophia squeezed my arm. One battle at a time. Focus on today. Inside the courtroom, I saw them for the first time since the lockout. My mother kept her eyes fixed forward, face stiff. My father didn't look away. He glared at me with pure contempt. Jason sat behind them, slouched and silent. The hearing moved quickly. Sophia presented the will, deed transfer, and proof of the illegal eviction. Their lawyer, a sharp, cold-eyed man, argued I had abandoned the home voluntarily and that my parents had only secured it while I was away. Ms. Parker intended to drastically alter a historically significant home, he said, going against her grandmother's clear wishes. He argued that her parents, as the previous presumptive heirs, were merely acting to uphold the property's intended character. But the judge, an older woman with sharp, discerning eyes, didn't seem moved by that explanation. "The will is crystal clear, Mr. Baxter," she said. "Miss Parker is the rightful legal owner of the property. Whether her plans respect or disregard her grandmother's legacy is irrelevant to this courtroom." She shifted her attention to my parents. "Mr. and Mrs. Parker, if you wish to challenge the will, there were lawful processes for that. Locking out the legal owner and removing her belongings was not one of them." My mother started crying. My father's face went hard, jaw clenched in silent rage. The judge turned back to their lawyer. "I'm granting the emergency injunction. Miss Parker is to be given full, immediate access to her home. All personal belongings must be returned within 24 hours. If anything is missing or damaged, further action will be taken." I should have felt victorious, but instead, I felt nothing, just numb. As we stepped out of the courtroom, I caught my father muttered to my mother through clenched teeth, "This isn't over, not by a long shot." Outside, Sophia was already outlining next steps when a police officer approached. "Ashley Parker?" I nodded, my stomach twisting into knots. "Need to ask you a few questions about the stolen property reported by Margaret and Robert Parker." Even though Sophia clarified everything legally, I still had to endure being questioned about theft, in public, right outside the courthouse. Several co-workers from nearby firms saw the exchange. I could feel their judgment in every sideways glance. The following morning, as I was getting ready to return to the house, my boss asked to see me. "Ashley, is everything okay?" he asked carefully. "I've heard some things." My chest tightened. "What kind of things?" He looked uncomfortable. "There are rumors about some kind of legal dispute, something about theft, and a client mentioned a social media post. Something about turning a historic family property into a business. Apparently, it's causing concern." Panic rushed in. That client had to be the one I'd just landed in Chicago, the very one whose project I'd been behind on. My parents' smear campaign had made it into my work life. "It's personal," I said firmly. "My grandmother left me her home. There's a dispute over it, but everything is being resolved through legal channels." He nodded, but his eyes gave away his hesitation. "Just make sure it doesn't interfere with your performance. We can't risk losing the Westfield account." Later that day, accompanied by a locksmith and a police officer, Sophia's idea for safety, I finally stepped back inside my house. The scene was heartbreaking. While nothing was vandalized, the place had been emptied of anything meaningful. My grandmother's antique writing desk, where I'd often sat, was stripped bare, its drawers missing. The walls that once held decades of family photographs were blank. Even the old copper kitchen pots, a constant in my childhood, were gone. "Take photos of everything," Sophia reminded me, already snapping pictures. "This is a clear violation of the court order." The officer with us looked awkward. "You may want to file a separate theft report," he said quietly. The irony cut deep. My parents had accused me of stealing, while methodically looting my home themselves. That night, alone in the now barren house, the truth hit me hard. This wasn't just betrayal. They had tried to ruin me, legally, financially, professionally, emotionally. They were willing to destroy our relationship, tarnish my name, ignore my grandmother's final wishes, all for money. I curled up. On the bare mattress, they'd taken the bedding, and cried until my throat burned. I had never felt so completely alone, so deeply abandoned by the very people who were supposed to love me the most. In that pitch-black moment, I genuinely considered giving up, Maybe I should just let them have the house. Maybe the money wasn't worth the damage to my family, to my reputation, to my sanity. Maybe I was being selfish, just like they'd claimed. I reached for my phone to call Sophia, ready to tell her I wanted to settle, when I noticed a new email notification. It was from an unfamiliar address. Subject line, "Your grandmother Eleanor, important information." Even though I was emotionally drained, curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. "Ashley, you don't know me, but I was your grandmother's nurse during her final months. There are things you should know about your parents' behavior before she passed. Please call me if you'd like to talk." It was signed Patricia Wilson with a phone number. The timing felt suspicious, too perfectly timed. Was this another setup by my parents? A fake nurse with fake stories, just another ploy to discredit me? I almost deleted it. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. But the area code? Western Massachusetts. That's where my grandmother's sister lived. "Hello? Ashley? It's your Aunt Patricia. I've been trying to reach you." "Aunt Patricia?" I blinked in confusion. "Did you just email me? About being Grandma's nurse?" There was a short silence. "No, sweetheart, I'm not a nurse. But I do have something important you should see." She explained that my grandmother had left certain items with her, things she didn't want my parents to find. It was nearly midnight. But for the first time in weeks, I felt a faint glimmer of hope. The next morning, I called in sick again, then drove 2 hours to Western Massachusetts to see her. It had been years. She and my mom had cut ties long before I was born. She never came to holidays, never sent more than a birthday card and a crisp $20 bill. Her cottage was modest and surrounded by bright flowers. Despite being in her 80s, she stood tall and sharp-eyed at the door. "You look like Eleanor," she said, inspecting my face. She had the same stubborn jaw when she cared about something. Inside, we sat down over tea in porcelain cups. Then she told me everything. "Your grandmother knew your parents would fight the will. They'd been pushing her to sell that house for years, ever since the property values jumped." I was stunned. "She never told me that," I said. Patricia's expression hardened. "She was trying to protect you. They got aggressive, especially toward the end. Robert even talked about getting her declared incompetent so they could control her finances." My teacup rattled in my hands. They tried to declare Grandma incompetent? They even scheduled a psych evaluation. Eleanor was livid. That's when she decided to leave everything to you. Patricia stood up, walked to her desk, and opened a hidden compartment. She pulled out a manila envelope. She gave me these. Told me to give them to you if anything happened. Inside were several documents, a handwritten letter from my grandmother, explaining her decision. Copies of emails between my parents and real estate developers, dated 2 years ago, and a small USB drive. Patricia inserted it into her computer. It was my grandmother's voice, strong and calm, a secret recording. She was talking about how my parents tried to force her to sell. "I am of sound mind and body," she said clearly. "I'm making this recording because I believe my daughter and son-in-law may try to contest my will. My decision to leave my home to my granddaughter, Ashley, is made freely and with full awareness." Tears poured down my cheeks. Patricia handed me a tissue. "She loved you very much," she whispered. "She trusted you with that house when she couldn't trust her own daughter." Back in Boston, I rushed the materials to Sophia. She combed through everything, her brow rising as she read. "This changes everything," she said, holding up the USB drive. "This proves your grandmother was of sound mind, and that your parents were manipulating her. Those emails show they were planning this for years." "What happens now?" I asked. "We go on the offensive," she said, already typing furiously at her laptop. "I'm filing for a more permanent injunction and adding claims for harassment and intentional infliction of emotional distress." That afternoon, Sophia received an email from my parents' attorney. The subject line was blunt. "We have a problem." The body requested an urgent meeting to discuss settlement options. "Recent developments have altered our client's position," it said. "We believe it would be in everyone's best interest to resolve this matter privately." Sophia gave a tight, knowing smile. "They know we have something. They just Don't know what. 2 days later, we met in a glass-walled conference room at Sophia's law firm. My parents looked smaller. My mother's usual polished poise couldn't hide her exhausted eyes. My father's shoulders, once squared with certainty, slumped ever so slightly. Jason sat beside them, refusing to meet my eyes. Their attorney, Mr. Baxter, opened the meeting with the same cold formality. My clients are prepared to return all property removed from the premises and formally acknowledge Miss Parker's legal ownership. In exchange, they ask that she drop all additional claims and agree not to pursue criminal charges. Sophia leaned in, voice calm but firm. That's not nearly sufficient. My client has endured financial loss, reputational harm, and deep emotional trauma. She's lost income, incurred unnecessary expenses, and suffered under a deliberate campaign to damage her both personally and professionally. We're open to discussing reasonable compensation, Baxter replied, shifting slightly in his seat. Before continuing, Sophia said, I think it's time everyone hears the evidence we now hold. She played a portion of my grandmother's recorded statement. My mother gasped. My father's face turned ghost white. As you can hear, Sophia continued, Eleanor Parker made her intentions perfectly clear. She feared undue influence, not from my client, but from yours. We also possess written documentation showing a 2-year effort to sell the property to developers, well before Mrs. Parker's passing. Baxter asked for a recess to consult with his clients. When they returned, everything about the atmosphere had changed. No eye contact, no posturing. Baxter's voice now carried a different tone. My clients are prepared to issue a formal retraction of all previous statements implying wrongdoing on Ms. Parker's part. They will return all items, compensate for temporary displacement, and provide damages for emotional distress. We negotiated for hours. Eventually, we reached a settlement that felt like true vindication. My parents would issue a public apology. They'd return every possession taken. They'd pay all my legal fees and additional compensation. Most importantly, they agreed to stay away from the property permanently unless given written permission. As we gathered our things, Jason stepped toward me, uncertain. Ash, I'm sorry. I didn't know it had gone this far. I knew they were upset about the house, but I never imagined they'd do this. I looked at him carefully. You stood by while they tried to ruin me. I was stuck in the middle. They're our parents. And I'm your sister, I cut in. You picked a side. I closed my folder. I don't know when I'll be ready to speak to you again. His shoulders dropped. I felt no urge to comfort him. Not yet. The pain was too raw. Outside, walking to our cars, Sophia touched my arm, gently. This is a win, Ashley. Better than most outcomes in cases like this. But I want you to be prepared. Reconciliation after something like this. It's rare. Are you okay with that? I thought about it. About everything they'd done. Everything they'd been willing to risk. Just to take what wasn't theirs. I nodded slowly. I think I'm finally seeing them clearly, I said. And maybe that clarity is the most valuable thing I could have gotten out of this. The formal settlement took place in a sterile downtown boardroom. My parents sat across from me looking like strangers. My mother's perfectly manicured nails drummed the table. My father stared out the window, jaw clenched. Sophia had warned me beforehand. Stay calm, stay focused. This is no longer about emotion, she'd said. This is about protection. Our attorneys handled most of the talking as we carefully reviewed the settlement terms. My parents would return all items removed from the house within 48 hours. They would issue formal written retractions to every individual or institution they had contacted about me, including my workplace. They would cover all legal fees and pay $50,000 in damages. They would also maintain a distance of at least 100 yards from the property, unless I specifically invited them. These terms are excessive, my father muttered bitterly. His lawyer shot him a warning look and placed a hand on his arm. Robert, we've already discussed this. When it came time to sign, my mother's hand trembled slightly. She looked up at me, searching, as if hoping for a final softening. Ashley. This is still your family, she said quietly. Is all this really necessary? I met her gaze without flinching. You filed false police reports? You tried to wreck my career. You took things from Grandma. Things she meant for me. So, yes, this is necessary. My father flushed red. You've always been stubborn, just like your grandmother. This house, it's torn the family apart. No, I said, calm and unwavering. Your actions did that. The house was just your excuse. After the signatures were complete, Jason caught up with me in the hallway. Unlike our parents, he seemed visibly shaken by the revelations Aunt Patricia had exposed. I should have stood up for you, he said, voice thick with emotion. I was a coward. I wasn't ready to forgive him. Not yet. But I could see the sincerity in his remorse. Yes, you should have, I replied. But you're here now, and you're admitting it. That's something. He paused. Can we talk sometime? Maybe grab coffee next week? I gave a small nod. Maybe. I'll text you. Reclaiming my space began with a deep and intentional cleansing. Leah and 2 close friends joined me that weekend. We saged every room, threw open all the windows, and scrubbed away the lingering shadows. We ordered greasy pizza, drank cheap wine, and sat laughing on the porch, deliberately creating new, joyful memories. To Ashley, Leah toasted, raising her glass, who didn't just get her house back, she got her power back. The return of my grandmother's possessions was carefully overseen by our attorneys. 2 moving trucks arrived, each filled with labeled boxes and furniture. I went down the checklist we'd made, item by item, noting what was still missing. The key. Jewelry box isn't here, I said. Neither is her journal about the house. My mother had come, this time with prior permission through Sophia. She looked tired, defeated. The jewelry box? It's in our safe deposit box, she said. As for the journal, she hesitated. I may have thrown it out in anger. I'm sorry. Losing the journal felt like losing my grandmother all over again. I turned away quickly to hide the tears. If it's found, Sophia said sharply, you'll return it immediately. Once my parents and the movers were gone, I sat alone in the front parlor, the room I still planned to convert into a personal gallery. I was surrounded by boxes of memories. It should have felt like victory. But instead, I felt hollow. The house was legally mine, physically mine. But the family I once knew? Gone. Even if something someday resembled reconciliation, it would never be what it once was. They'd shown me who they truly were. And that truth was not something I could unknow. Began slowly rebuilding my life. First came the professional fallout. I met with my boss, explained everything, presented the signed retraction. He looked relieved and sympathetic. Family drama can be brutal, he said. Take what time you need, but we'll need you at full strength soon, Westfield still, hanging by a thread. I dove back into work with clear-eyed determination. Within weeks, the Westfield campaign was back on track, and I even landed an extra micro-contract to expand their fall rollout. The public reaction in my neighborhood was mixed. Some who had known my grandmother for years offered quiet support. Some people understood what had happened. Others, especially my parents' friends, remained cool and distant. I made peace with that. I wasn't going to waste my energy trying to win everyone over. The truth was on my side. Documented, legally acknowledged. Moved forward with my plans to turn the house into an art gallery. I hired an architect who specialized in historical restorations, determined to preserve the soul of the home while shaping it into something new. The project was healing. Each phase of the work felt like a quiet promise fulfilled. To my grandmother, to myself. Jason and I began a cautious but steady reconciliation. Weekly coffee meetings became our ritual. Unlike our parents, he seemed truly remorseful, willing to make amends. They're not handling this well, he admitted one morning. Dad's drinking more, and Mom barely leaves the house. They feel humiliated. I didn't humiliate them, I replied. They did that to themselves. I know, he said quickly. I'm not defending them. Just thought you should know. I appreciated his honesty, even if I still wasn't ready to reach out to our parents. The wounds were too deep, the betrayal still raw. The first holiday season was the hardest. Thanksgiving had always been at my grandmother's house, now mine, with my mother organizing the feast and my father carving the turkey. This year, I hosted a Friendsgiving instead. The dining room was filled with laughter, music, and the people who'd stood by me. "It's different," Leah said as we washed dishes afterward. "But maybe better? No tension, no eggshells around your mom's moods." She was right. The evening had been joyful, free from judgment, from whispered criticism. That night, after everyone left, I curled into my grandmother's favorite chair by the fireplace. The silence was comforting. And for the first time, I let myself feel it all, the grief and the freedom intertwined. I had lost the family I thought I knew. But in their absence, I had gained something rarer, the knowledge that I could survive alone, stand in my truth, and still be whole. The gallery opened in the spring. We featured local artists exploring themes of home, memory, and change. The turnout was bigger than expected. Even some neighbors who'd once been skeptical came to show support. "Your grandmother would have loved this," an older neighbor said, gesturing around the room. "She always said this house needed young energy." Jason came too. He brought a small housewarming gift. A black and white photo of our grandmother standing on the porch beaming. "Found it in one of Mom's albums," he said. "Figured it belonged here." As the guests moved through the bright, welcoming space, I felt my grandmother with me. Her presence soft but certain. She would have approved of the art, the restoration, the independence. For the first time since the locks had been changed, I felt at home. 1 year after the court decision that returned the house to me, I stood in the same space, now transformed, hosting a photography exhibit on family legacies and generational patterns. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. "Full circle," Leah whispered, sipping her wine beside me. It truly was. The past year had been one of complete transformation. The house was no longer a battleground. It had become a sanctuary. The renovations were done with meticulous attention. Every cornice, every stained glass pane preserved and polished. I'd blended history with modern warmth. It felt like mine. The gallery operated 3 days a week, bringing in enough revenue to cover maintenance without disrupting the peace of the neighborhood. My career, too, had not only recovered, it had soared. The focus and resilience that the ordeal demanded of me had become my greatest assets. What I discovered during that conflict translated into something powerful, a quiet but unshakable confidence at work. I'd recently been promoted to creative director, a role with real influence, a team of my own, and the freedom to pursue meaningful, passion-driven projects. My relationship with Jason had also changed, no longer bound by obligation, but rebuilt through honesty. Our weekly coffees evolved into friendship. He didn't shy away from the hard conversations. "I was afraid," he admitted once, voice low. "Afraid of disappointing them, afraid to speak up. Watching you, you taught me what courage really is." He'd just moved into an apartment a few blocks away. A physical, intentional choice to stand beside me, not behind them. As for our parents, they remained a painful scar, not fully healed. We kept communication limited, controlled, distanced. Short text on holidays. A polite birthday meeting in a public space. There were no illusions anymore, no expectations. I didn't need their approval. I no longer sought love from people who'd proven themselves incapable of giving it. "My dear," my therapist once said, "they're never going to be the parents you deserved. Accepting that truth is part of your freedom." She was right, but family, I learned, can come from other places. Aunt Patricia became a constant, visiting monthly, sharing stories about my grandmother I'd never heard before. Leah and my closest friends proved more loyal than blood had ever been. Even a few artists from the gallery became part of the family I was building for myself. Still, the biggest change was within me. That version of me, the one who'd read the text message, we changed all the locks. You don't have a home anymore. Felt like a shadow now. She had believed in unconditional love from parents, that family meant protection, not punishment. But she was gone. In her place stood someone clear-eyed, strong, and finally at peace. Had learned to tell the difference between love and control, compromise and self-erasure, forgiveness and foolishness. The exhibit was winding down when I saw them, Jason, and my mother. My breath caught. She hadn't stepped foot in this house since the settlement. Jason's look said it all. This wasn't planned. I approached carefully. She looked older, fragile. Clutching her purse tightly, she said, "The gallery is beautiful. Your grandmother would have approved." It wasn't an apology. Not even close. But it was something. A faint, flickering recognition of what I'd created. "Thank you for coming," I said politely, keeping the calm boundary I'd worked so hard to build. Her gaze moved slowly around the gallery, taking in images of families, some filled with joy, others clearly fractured. "Is your father well?" I asked, more out of habit than concern. "Managing his blood pressure," she replied. Then came the shift, a familiar edge in her tone. "The doctor says he needs less stress," as if I was the source. But I didn't react. No guilt, no defensiveness. Just a quiet nod. She had no power here. After they left, Jason texted. "Sorry about that. She insisted on coming when she heard where I was headed. You handled it with grace." And I had. The moment was tense, but it didn't destroy me. Didn't define me. That alone was proof of how far I'd come. Later that night, after locking up, I walked through the quiet rooms of my home. In my grandmother's study, left almost untouched, I paused at her old desk. There sat a framed quote she had loved, Maya Angelou. "You may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them." That was her final gift to me. Not just the house, but the chance to rise through fire and find something unshakable inside myself. In trying to take my home, my parents had unknowingly given me something far greater, the clarity to know my own worth. To anyone out there who's ever been betrayed by those meant to protect you, please remember, your worth isn't defined by who failed to see it. Family isn't just where we come from. It's what we build, and sometimes what we have the strength to walk away from. If you've ever had to stand up for something that was rightfully yours, even against your own blood, I invite you to share your story in the comments. If this helped you feel seen, less alone in your struggle, please subscribe and hit the like button. Sometimes our deepest wounds become our greatest teachers, but we don't have to heal alone. Thank you for listening to mine. And whatever battle you're facing, I hope you find your strength too.